Hello, I'm CraftyAndy, and these are my thoughts. There was a time I worked as a senior-focused advisor in regards to insurances and investments in 2012. And during that time, I must have sat down and heard the stories of over 100 different people. You see, I worked in sales in a network marketing company, and it involved meeting people in their houses and sitting down with them and discussing their retirements. I get this as anecdotal. I'm not here to argue some definitive case, just sharing some of my experience. I'm not going to bore you with all the nitty-gritty details of how things worked. I'll save that for another video. All you need to know for this is that we focused on life insurance, health insurance, long-term care, and protecting investments from market volatility for retirees between 55 to 75. There wasn't a tally being kept, but one thing is for certain is how devastating a medical event can be for a person or a couple. It doesn't seem to matter when we start to fall apart either. Eventually, all our monetary gain and value is destined to be whittled away. In a capitalist society where money is God, you are dead without it. Before Medicare, the insurance you have, if at all, will only cover so much. So many people wind up being on Medicaid over a heart attack, an accident, or some other emergency they can't afford. And for those who don't know, in order to qualify for Medicaid or poverty status, depends on the size of the household, but generally with just one person, your assets have to accumulate to roughly around $2,000 a month, depending on the state and location you're in. One of my work partners used to complain whenever a person brought up Medicaid taking care of them. First off, they would be too poor for us to help them in that regard anyways when it comes to sales. 3 types of people you can never sell, as I was told: the poor, the sick, and the stupid. But being stupid doesn't mean you can't be the seller, which led to my partner for the day saying after the encounter, "Well, yeah, of course they don't need our help when the government takes care of everything for them." Like, alright, if it's so great, why don't you go on it then? Sell your shit, dump your investments, get on Medicaid. See how well it works out for you. What do you think cutting off benefits to some 60-year-old man or woman is going to motivate them to start some career at McDonald's working $12 an fucking hour to pay for their $800 prescription glasses, let alone their medications and other bills? And we were working in northern Michigan where there are no buses, and a gallon of milk will pinch you for $8.50 outside of the 25-mile-away major cities. There was one retiree I met who owned a distillery, and he shared his story of one of his workers, while in his 20s, suffered from a freak heart attack. Guy was stuck with a $100,000 bill. Who the fuck can afford that shit? Don't get me started with how many people were diagnosed with diabetes. I swear to fuck, every person was on some sort of pill or taking insulin. Other times it's freak exceptions. One couple couldn't be outside their home for too long because they required a special air filtration system due to chemicals used on their farm that contained Agent Orange. COPD was an interesting condition for all you smokers out there. One client I had described it as a life-draining disease. And sure enough, I did meet quite a few people who had their life drained from it. One such individual we walked in on. My manager turned to me immediately and said, "We're gonna be out of here in like a few minutes if we can't figure out anything to help him with." Because the first thing that we were greeted with when we walked in this mobile home was a big pile of garbage in the middle of the kitchen, about as high as the sink would be. Smack dab right in the middle. We had to walk around it. And in the living room, where it's just entirely filled with oxygen tanks. Imagine a living room, how big your living room is, and it's all filled with oxygen tanks. And to top it all off, he had from floor to ceiling piles of logs and wood, a fireplace going, and him lighting a cigarette and saying, "I don't even care if I blow myself up right now." He went on a rant about how you can't even have a nativity scene out in the open anymore. Essentially, Fox News and his television were the only windows to the greater outside world.
Tell me, why does it sound so easy to breathe on TV?
One can't help but think his view on the grand scheme of things is a little skewed. Nonetheless, you want to talk about a life-draining condition. He essentially was being denied coverage of his medical bill because he was submitted to the hospital due to alcohol poisoning. Which, considering you're living out in the middle of nowhere in a mobile home not really much to do, not really having any money to do anything else other than sit around and smoke and drink. Can't blame them. And I have no idea how long oxygen tanks last, but I do know roughly they cost about $50 to $100, sometimes $200 a tank, depending on what you need, I imagine. One woman I met was covered in what looked to be warts, like all over her body. I don't know what condition she had, but I was made aware that her treatments cost $15,000 a month. Another couple we met, the wife had to use the bathroom once every several minutes, constantly, just going in, relieving herself. Why? Well, there was a time she went to a chiropractor and he broke her spine. All of a sudden, all the paperwork he had on her too happened to just, I guess, spontaneously combust. No settlement, no lawyers, no suing, just a horrible incident, possibly negligence, but you can imagine the recovery costs aren't exactly capable of being paid out of pocket. There are others, but for those who don't have a lot of spare cash or high-paying work, it's basically a sentence to the poorhouse for any major medical expense. Those who did well, who were the ones we could do business with, they had more comprehensive coverage that mainly came in the form of government workers, teachers, military, or working for one of the big three auto companies back when they actually had more factory work. Now, I know a lot of people, when they picture older people in poverty, they might be in dilapidated shacks. Sometimes they were. Other times they did have their own homes that were owned and taken care of. It varies. Point is, you're not going to be able to do much of anything else. On top of being lucky enough to afford good coverage, another factor in helping in this regard would be having the foresight to invest their money in stocks, mutual funds, bonds over their working years and managing to wait it out to recover after the 2008 financial crash. The majority of people were just breaking even when I was doing this in 2012, by the way. And believe me, I've met more than one couple who lost almost all of their savings and investments due to a well-intentioned family member or just a shitty bit of advice from an advisor. It amazed me the general attitude when it came to finances and investments after I went through the classes and got my state certification. When it comes to losses in the market, they just look at their money going down and say, well, that's just loss on paper. That doesn't mean anything. It'll come back up. Yeah, it'll come back up, but when you hit your later years of 50, 60, 70, especially 80s, and you're still alive and you might need to tap that amount after line go down, you're getting fucked in 3 different ways at that point. It also was interesting to learn how a lot of financial advisors will just get a number of clients and just make their money through fees by moving money around on different accounts. Now, of course, their goal is to make you more money because they make money on top of that. But at the same time, they get a little cut of it every time they move their money around in your accounts. And that cut comes out of your finances. Oh, by the way, this isn't financial advice. Nothing I say is financial advice because, gotta cover my ass. But just based on my own experience, it's best in those years to just cut out those people altogether. Look for something like an indexed annuity. Learn the difference between different annuities and learn that index just means that you get an average percentage every year. Depending on the company, it's usually a lot better than any savings account, money market, or CD currently is. Again, I don't know how much that has changed over the last 10 years. My guess is probably not that much. But hey, it's up to you to do your own damn research on that topic. Point is, it's just another realm where you can get fucked in and set yourself up for the poorhouse when it comes to your own well-being and long-term survival.
Vijay and his wife invested a total of $70,000 through 3 transactions.
Central Bank of Ireland puts out a statement that basically says that JMS ICAV is actually like an unauthorized firm. They pretty much say, I'm sorry if anyone actually puts money here, you have basically lost your money. When we found out, we were just numb. We've actually been scammed.
Working with seniors on the negative side of things, it was like looking into the future of some people I grew up with. Fucking haunting. While I try to be mindful of spending and how I take care of myself, It is frustrating how a lot of people have this attitude of, I can eat and drink and do nothing, cause in the end we all die. True, but depending on how you take care of yourself makes the difference between walking around like normal in your 60s or needing a walker at 45. Maintaining a quality life is something you should be mindful of, right? Already in their early 60s, some friends my dad has had are dying off from years of heavy drinking, and one of my former coworkers is now in an assisted living home in their early 50s because they insisted on continuing to party like they're still 25. They suffered from some kind of aneurysm. Point is, just be mindful of yourself and limit as best as you can. My dad, for example, has the occasional beer, but he does walks for exercise and has quit smoking for over 20 years now, heading into his 70s with my mom close behind. If you do manage to survive this period of time and reach Medicare age of 65, there are plenty of other ways you can still get fucked into the gutter. First, I want to touch on these Medicare Advantage plans that are still around. Oh, in the sales job, we were good at getting people out of Medicare Advantage plans. These were an attempt by the Bush administration to privatize Medicare, something that's being pushed still to this day. They enticed people with very low monthly rates, some even with no monthly rate, but compared to regular Medicare paired with a traditional coverage plan, they were shit. It's better than nothing, but basically it extends the shoddy coverage we get from health insurance now into your senior years. So despite the place I worked for being a scam network marketing company that has changed its name, I think 3 times now, again, details will come in another video. I'll give my boss and managers all the credit for having actual principles when it came to running the business in this area. And I'll add that it also was good at shielding our branch and weeding out undesirables who thought they could cut corners or scam through sales. But here's the thing about Medicare and why there is a business in it that shouldn't exist. Medicare will only cover 80% of medical costs. And in this country, America, you know damn well 20% is a hefty price still, especially when it comes to needing things like a joint replacement and other inevitable procedures the majority of us will go through. Medication, from what I've looked up, is still up to $2,000 a year, meaning everything is covered after you spend that amount. But that's besides the next point here, that is the 20% of missing coverage, which is where we would come in. To cover that gap, you have to have insurance plans that are all the same in terms of what they cover. To spare the boring details, the important thing is roughly the price can range from $40 a month to $200 a month. That fluctuate in terms of yearly price increases depending on the company you were with. Here's where it gets fuckety. All the types of coverage are the same across the board, no matter what company you're with. But there's a lot that can be determined when it comes to your pricing. Are you a smoker? Well, you bet your ass you'll be paying out the whole for the coverage. Depending on the company next year, your price might increase $10 a month or $50 a month. What if you're in a situation where you can't afford the monthly increase next year? Well, you might not qualify for another company's plan. If anything happened during this time, you might be stuck or just have to go without it and hope for the best. Say you need assisted living or constant medical care like dialysis. Well, Medicare and your insurance plan, if you have one, will only cover so much of that. Probably get some of those extra funds to a trusted relative or get to spending it on random shit. New furniture, new car, a Shadow the Hedgehog collector's item. Because Medicaid can look back a number of years to determine if you qualify for those benefits. Finally, we're at the one ultimate way you're going to get fucked in the end, and that is hitting the age where you can no longer reliably take care of yourselves, whether a married couple or individual. A side note on this first, I think is interesting. When working with seniors, there is the same set of attitudes from each one. Some had the attitude of, well, I took care of my kids when they were babies so they can take care of me when I'm an old baby.
Mama needs a mama's girl to take good care.
Others would joke about suicide. Well, some would declare that they wouldn't dare burden their kids with such a thing. As far as inheritance goes, some wanted to have a legacy to pass on to their kids or other relatives, while others had the attitude of, well, I made mine, so it's up to them to make theirs. One well-invested and rich person said, if I have a penny to my name by the time I die, then I miscalculated. This is my money to have fun with, up until it's gone. Many people I met set themselves up pretty well, and I can imagine a lot of them will be able to take the long sleep, allowing more things to be possible for their kids and grandkids, or at least keep themselves comfortable up until that point. However, there are many who end up needing help. Help that can't come from moving in with their kids, either due to space, cost, or some underlying trauma they cause leading to family cutting them off. Who knows? One way or another, they are off to the home. Nursing homes, on average, can cost $7,000 a month. One such place was in Traverse City, one of the areas we worked. $100,000 a year to live in, or more, depending on your accommodations you want. If you don't pass on those investments you made early, well, they will be sure glad to take it from you. They'll take it all from you. Some won't even take Medicaid, some won't even take Medicare. They might declare you too healthy to live there and kick you out to the street because they're not getting enough money out of you. And guess what? There's a separate insurance plan to cover this possibility as well. Isn't that nice? You could be paying $300 to $500 a month to cover health, life, and long-term care insurance. Now, I didn't deal in anything regarding nursing homes. If you were in one of those, you wouldn't qualify for any kind of health insurance plan nor life insurance, much less investments, because you don't have any at this point. Can you afford $100,000 a year to live anywhere? How about some nightmare stories? Long-term care insurance hasn't been around that long in terms of insurance types. It started in the late 70s when people started going into the system and making claims in the early 2000s. And turns out that the cost was underestimated. So naturally, rather than just paying out the benefits and becoming insolvent and bankrupt, they started denying coverage and decided taking on lawsuits and fines. They figured that was more cost effective. Now keep in mind, insurance companies, in order to exist, they have to put some of their assets in a pool so that if they do go bankrupt, that pool exists to pay out benefits. Because what's the point of insurance if you don't get the benefits out of it, right? So in other words, there was no excuse for them to prolong their existence by deciding to just pay fines and lawsuits by denying claims. One of the managers I worked with was with a company she would later resign from at this time. She was arguing with her own company on the phone over not covering one of her clients. The client was bedridden. She could not physically get up and move on her own, and the company claimed she was still too healthy to qualify for payments. That story is old enough to drink at this point, and though in that realm it's slightly better, I suppose, in terms of how they are covered, overall it's shit. It was shit back then, it's shit now, and the fact there is a fucking push from mainstream news media to try and gaslight us into thinking there isn't a pressure cooker worth of resentment ready to explode over the people making bank in this sector on top of all other sectors is fucking frustrating to the point it puts me in a tearful rage.
The United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, he was
Suddenly dead from spontaneous lead poisoning.
of course, on Wednesday. Quote, I'm an ER nurse, and the things I've seen dying patients get denied for by insurance, it makes me physically sick. I just can't feel sympathy for him because of all those patients and their families. Thompson was not a criminal. He wasn't even an advocate of death, the way, for example, abortion or euthanasia advocates are. Brian Thompson's great sin, according to these people, is that he was the head of a company that exists within a mixed private-public healthcare framework, and that he did his job, because that's how health insurance actually works. Some things are covered, and some things are not. And you may not like the application of the coverage, and it may be bad. That is not an excuse for murder.
Witnessing this all play out myself sure as hell makes a good case for the right to die with dignity. Now when you bring this up, for some reason, a bunch of fucking morons can't help but picture a Logan's Run type of society where you get to be executed at age 30. If you think that's what it will lead up to, then you're already too dumb to function in my mind. I wonder if you can even dress yourself still. Maybe I should put you in a home. Anyways, my grandfather was able to peacefully live out his final days in his home with my dad and uncles taking turns cleaning out his bedpans for almost an entire year. I'll never forget the smell. It reached across the entire house. My grandmother would later suffer from Alzheimer's disease, and before being moved to a nursing home, she would stay with me and my parents on occasion, along with other relatives. I remember when my parents were out one day, she broke down, crying, saying, I just need to kill myself. That's what I should do. My other grandmother would essentially fall to pieces suddenly one day. From what I gather, it was due to just not checking up with doctors, and so her body just lost most of its normal function. My other grandfather would then later get dementia, and I like to think he comfortably lived out his remaining days in the nursing home before he too died. You know, whatever inheritance and assets they had at the time were divided up amongst the family. Houses were sold. Everything was taken care of by everybody else because they had that support structure. To me, though, it just comes off as a fucking racket. Like, there has to be a point where I should be able to request that I get the big sleep. I don't plan on having kids. The idea of having a stranger change my bedpan, wipe my ass, and feed me when I'm basically a vegetable doesn't sound like a real existence to me. There are plenty of examples I don't need to get into on here of court-assigned conservators taking advantage of the elderly, and the fact nursing homes are so expensive and overpriced already are now being bought up by private equity firms who seek to cut staff, training, and materials so they can try to make these places profitable.
Ambulance companies, hospice care, nursing homes, urgent care centres, specialty clinics, fertility centres. All of them are increasingly being purchased by private equity. One study from 2021 found that when private equity takes over nursing homes, the use of antipsychotic medication increases by 50%. I guess if you keep the patients sedated, you don't need as many staff to take care of them.
I can only imagine the hell conditions that await for us down the road, if we even get that far. I want to stress this is a personal decision one makes. If it comes down to it and I end up taking on some responsibility, taking care of my own parents, I'm not about to complain or argue with them like, thanks for everything, mom and dad, raising me and shit. But you're on your own, see ya. Unless you manage to squirrel away $5 million by the time you hit your senior years and seek retirement, one way or another, we're all going to end up in the poorhouse in the long run, because I can promise, from what I'm reading up on, the millennials out there who think they got some big inheritance coming that will allow them to finally purchase a new home that starts to crumble after 5 years ain't likely going to happen. Yeah, new home conditions, those are another story.
Gas valve, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this cannot be turned off. That valve is up against the wall. Problem number 2 is I smell gas.
You ever turn the handle on a shower to cut the water on and the whole wall moves?
The big question here is, what kind of system will be in place for us when that time comes? One that takes care of its seniors and aging population, or one that drains it for whatever monetary worth they have left, forcing you to live when you can't physically function? Oh, I imagine they love that. Not the people that have to take care of you, just the higher ups. You know, don't even need to give you anything other than a colostomy bag and a feeding tube while you're wheeled from bed to TV and later back to the bed again. Actually, why even do that? Instead, just let us lay in bed while every so often the janitor comes by to spray a little Febreze on our dying bodies until we croak, collecting our Social Security and Medicare checks all the while. These are just my thoughts, though. Arise with nothing, leave with nothing.
Good day, sir!
Now, if you like that, I got a store being set up for art prints, among other things. I also got a Patreon, and you want to give me some tips. That being said, that's it. Share this around and subscribe and all that shit. Bye.